Welcome back to the BJJ Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Ford. My guest today is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. She's a 2022 ADCC champion. She's also a black belt world champion in the gi and in no gi as well. She's an ADCC West Coast Trials champion and a two-time world's absolute silver medalist in both gi and no gi. As a brown belt, she was a world champion at weight and absolute, a no gi Pan Am's champion at weight and absolute, and an American Nationals champion at weight and absolute. She was also a purple belt world no gi champion. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be joined today by one of Jiu-Jitsu's most exciting stars today, Amy Campo. How are you today, Amy?
I'm good. Thank you for such a flattering introduction.
Those are all your accomplishments, my friend. Congratulations on all your success. It's been super cool seeing you rise from the colored ranks all the way up to the black belt ranks and continuing to have such great success. So I congratulate you on all your accomplishments and thank you for being here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Of course. So, Amy, the question I always like to start with every guest, tell us where you're from originally and what your life was like before you found jiu-jitsu.
Okay, so I'm from Ogden, Utah in the United States. My life before jiu-jitsu was not much. All I did really was go to school and maybe hang out with friends occasionally. And that's all I did. I wasn't involved in any previous sports or any clubs or groups or anything. I guess I did choir, but I don't think that really pertains to anything in jiu-jitsu. Yeah, that is just, I just didn't do tons. I always loved sports and I loved activities and things, but I was never a part of any groups until I was a part of jiu-jitsu.
That's really cool. That's a very common thing. There's a lot of people who are in jiu-jitsu who don't have any sort of athletic background, but boy, when they get involved, like they just get hooked, and some of them rise pretty high in jiu-jitsu, you know? So it's always cool to hear people that don't have, not that it's not impressive if someone wrestled before or did judo or played football or something. It's still impressive that someone would do well having an athletic background, but it's even more cool when someone who doesn't have any sports background comes in and becomes like a dominating champion in jiu-jitsu. So that's a really cool facet of your story. I appreciate that. Yeah. What kind of
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. What kind of sports did you like? Like as far as like sports that you were interested in watching? Was there anything in Utah that you watched?
I liked, no, not watched because my mom didn't like having any sort of sports like that on the TV or anything. So I didn't watch any. But I did really like just at school, I liked to play softball and volleyball. I thought both of those were a lot of fun. And I think badminton's really fun too. But yeah, those, yeah.
That's awesome.
I like those.
Now, how did you eventually find jiu-jitsu?
So that's where it gets interesting is my brother, he's 6 years older than I am. His name is Ryder. He would get in street fights all the time. And my dad was like, you know what, we need to take you to a gym so you know how to actually fight. And maybe you'll learn some discipline too. So maybe you get in less fights. Right. So my dad was enrolling my brother and he was just dropping him off at the gym one day. And he's like, oh, you want to go for the ride? And I was like, sure. So I went with him. And he let me watch the whole class, and he just kind of watched me while I watched the class, and he goes, so you think you'd ever want to do something like this? And I just looked at him and I just nodded. I didn't think anything would come out of it because my mom was very conservative. So I was just like, yep. And he talks to the coach for like 30 minutes. And I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? But he signs me up for all of the classes, all of them, MMA, Muay Thai, Jiu Jitsu, all of them, and buys me all of the gear for each of the classes. And I was just absolutely astonished. Like, he buys me all this. And the first thing he says afterwards is, don't tell your mother.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like, this has to be our thing. You can't get me in trouble for signing up for a fight club. Yeah.
Yep. And then I just did it every day since then.
That's
as
so
much
cool.
as I could.
That's so cool. Now, it sounds like you got to have a pretty wide variety of things to try out. So you got to try Muay Thai, you got to do boxing, wrestling, MMA, and then Jiu-Jitsu. What made you gravitate most towards Jiu-Jitsu? At what point do you think you realized?
Mostly was the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually really like MMA and Muay Thai. I really like, and especially like all the cross training from each of them just helps with everything. So I actually really like all of them. And I've competed in MMA as well. Or I've done one fight in MMA, but I think I gravitated more towards jiu-jitsu because I was able to compete more in jiu-jitsu. You know, MMA you had to be 16 in Idaho, or you had to be 18 to be able to fight. And so I was like, well, I can't really like compete in this, but I can compete in jiu-jitsu. And so as I started to progress through tournaments, I started to get more serious about doing more and more jiu-jitsu. And when the tournaments would get to be like, I was doing something so often, I had to be like, I can't do as much Muay Thai because I'd be overtraining at this point. So I just kind of ended up funneling me towards jiu-jitsu.
That's amazing. That's so cool. Yeah, I forgot to mention in your introduction, you had a lot of success as a juvenile as well. So when you first arrived at the academy, how old were you? Like what age are we talking here?
I was 13.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you're very young. So that's really neat. And I love what you said there about how the other styles can complement your training as well. I actually started boxing as an adult again recently, and I feel like it helps with my cardio so much in jiu-jitsu, and I feel like it's pursuing another art. There are a lot of things, even if they're not both grappling arts, they transfer over as far as how you learn things and how you adapt things. What have been some of the biggest adaptations you think you've had learning jiu-jitsu from your experience in, say, a striking martial art?
Like things that parallel or just things that are different from jiu-jitsu?
No, things that parallel.
Things that parallel?
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of the concepts of like range is one of the concepts that transfers over. And the longer I'm in jiu-jitsu, the more there's interesting ways that range applies. Like there's a range where your kneecap or, a range of a height on your leg, and that where you put your pressure with your leg, with the height of your leg changes. And there's a height or a distance your hip needs to be from here to here. And that makes the difference in a sweep. And the distance of your shin going into a lasso, that makes the difference in your control. Like there's a lot of these range aspects. And that's one of the coolest ones to consider. And now when I teach my lessons now, I'll say that a lot. There's a range. There's a certain distance. There's a range, and you're better off here, and you're worse off here. And that's one of the things I think transfers over the most. Of course, there's other things like distance was one, balance and timing. Those are two other really big ones. Man, there's so many. Yeah. I'll leave it at that because there's too many.
That was an excellent answer. The idea of ranges, that's such an important thing. I'm glad you pointed that one out. Because, jiu-jitsu really is, and all martial arts for that matter, are really ultimately a game of managing the space between you and another person and taking and capitalizing on superior positioning and things like that. So, and you're someone that, with your guard passing and the way you play guard even, you can see how well you manage distance and capitalize on openings and spaces and things like that. So that's really cool that you credit a lot of your time spent in Muay Thai and other arts to that. That's really awesome. Now, Amy, you've spoken in the past that jiu-jitsu provided you a really great support systems, particularly during like rough patches in your life. Would you mind sharing that with us a little bit?
Sure. So jiu-jitsu became, first it just became something that I could latch onto to learn skills from, and to like put my energy towards, just have something to do, something to learn. And like that was really needed. But then my family situation started to deteriorate. My parents started to fight a lot, and they got divorced. And I just remember there was like so much tension and conflict at home that I would escape to training to be away from it. It was a different world. I could be somewhere else. I could be someone else, and I could escape to that world to kind of cope. And, it was a great cope because I'm learning, I'm being a part of a social atmosphere. I'm receiving endorphins and from exercise. So there's just is multifaceted in the ways that it could help me cope with some of the stresses that my family kind of, gave me.
Yeah, well, I know that's really personal. I appreciate you sharing it. And the reason I ask is that, there's a lot of people out there that go through rough patches. There's people that go through depression. There's people that go through losses in life. And I think having a community, like you said, and having a healthy activity to lean into is so important. So it's really cool that someone, even at the very highest level of the sport, has been in those positions where you really were able to lean into a community. And that's I do appreciate you sharing that. Amy, at what point did your competitive career really start taking off? When did you know that you wanted to be a jiu-jitsu champion?
It just kind of grew. Like I just was like, oh, I'm going to try a couple tournaments. Oh, I really like it. And then my coach is like, well, you should try some bigger ones, more challenge. And I was like, okay, fine. So we did bigger ones, and then we did bigger ones, and then we did bigger ones. And I was still able to find success in each one. And I was really, when I was like blue and purple belt, I really wanted to figure out like where I stood amongst the world. And as I grew into being a brown belt and a black belt, and I was able to continue to do well in those level of competitions, I was astonished each tournament. Like I was like, oh, that's all that it was required of me to be able to win this. Isn't there, like, I still think all the time I'll get in the tournament and I'll be like, this is it. Like, I feel like I feel like there should be more. Like, I can't be a black belt yet. Like, there's way more I got to learn. Like, it just kind of grew. I think as I was competing at brown belt, I started to realize, because, brown belt and black belt, depending on your level, it can be really close in level. It can be really far, it can be really close. And so as I started to realize that I was comparing with black belts already as a brown belt, I was like, wow, I think that's when I realized this is really doable. Like, you really can go win worlds next year. You really have a shot at winning ADCC. And like, that's when I think more of the belief started to set in, like, this is actually accomplishable. It's achievable. When I was a brown belt. And then I went and did some things as a black belt, and it was like, wow. And it makes sense though, because at the end of the day, you're just fighting. Like, you're meeting the same challenges and issues you are meeting with at the gym. And you could break down each fight into the same kind of problems you would troubleshoot at the gym. So the fights don't have to seem like there's some big foreign event. You do this every day. You're facing these problems every day, and you're not going to see anything that you haven't seen before. And it's really cool.
That is amazing. That is so cool. And what belt rank do you think was your biggest plateau? Like, what do you think was the most difficult phase of your jiu-jitsu to get through before you really started feeling like, oh wow, I'm matching levels with black belts here?
Before I started to match levels with black belts, I don't know, because I think brown belt was some of the first chances I got to kind of test myself against people who could be considered black belt level. I mean, I think I'd rolled with black belts when I was younger, but I don't know, because I didn't necessarily have a lot of opportunities to test myself that way as a blue and as a purple belt to see if like my level could comprehend that level. And I definitely don't suppose to think that it would, but like, brown belt was my first opportunity to do that. So I don't know if it could have been sooner.
That's great. I love what you were saying there too. You described how you surprised yourself with a lot of your success, and like you were like, man, that's all this is it? Like, it seems like it seems like there was supposed to be more there in order to accomplish the things you were accomplishing. Has self-doubt been something that you've dealt with as an athlete? There's something that a lot of athletes learn over time, is to become more mentally confident and sharp, and that's when everything takes off for them. Do you think that's something that you went through as well? Did you have some self-doubt you overcame as you were climbing up in the ranks?
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know if I would even call it doubt, but I guess you could call lack of belief doubt, because I guess I would go into tournaments and, I would just think to do my best, and, whatever happens, I'd kind of already accepted, win or lose. I just accepted that I was just there and I was just going to do my best, and it didn't matter. Yeah, I don't even think it was doubt. I think just a lack of like a strong belief or confidence that I was going to do something. I think my mentality for fighting is, I'm gonna do everything I can to be obstinate and difficult for you. I'm gonna do everything I can to win. But I never necessarily thought, I have some right to beat you. Like, I deserve to beat you, or I'm better than you. I've never thought like that. I've always thought, you know what? I'm more determined to work harder and to not quit and do everything in my power to beat you. I guess, yeah, my focus hasn't been in my confidence, and that's something that has grown on me, which I now have a little bit of confidence, but my focus has been more like, I need to win, and I'm going to do what it takes to win. This like mentality of defiance, as opposed to, I know I can do this.
That is really cool. Yeah. I really like that. It's a very humble mindset to have, and it's also a very work ethic driven mindset to have. So obviously, it's paying off. It's working very well. So I think that's I appreciate you giving us a peek behind the curtains there of what goes on in your mind. As far as preparing for tournaments and big events, how do you like to manage your camps? Like what kind of things do you like to do before in the weeks leading up to say a big ADCC or a Worlds event?
Well, training. My coach takes care of the camp, so I don't have to do so much accessory stuff. I think the most kind of accessory stuff I do is when I make sure that I am hitting a little bit of fun activities to kind of balance out the level of intensity with training. So I make sure I'm having some little fun activities, but nothing that's taking away from focus, because as the tournament gets closer, my focus narrows in and I don't want to do anything else. But I make sure to have a little bit of fun to kind of help manage stress. And sometimes, school can be that for me too. Sometimes I'll, it's very, very common that finals week happens to be the same week as Worlds. It just happens all the time. So some of my outside stress outside of training where I would dwell on like the competition, I can be like, oh, I need to apply myself to my schoolwork and have like a positive distraction. But yeah, I think the only other thing that changes before competition week besides like, oh, I need to go have a little bit of fun is I just try to rehab really well. And I don't think I've been perfect at this at all, but like just making sure you're sleeping and eating well, but trying to do a lot of stretching and trying to do ice baths. Ice baths or ice showers. Yeah, those are great. Or even the sauna and hot tub. Those are great just to help. And you can train your cardiovascular system with those too, like the vasodilation and vasoconstriction of your blood vessels. Like that's a helpful skill when it comes to explosiveness and cardio. So multiple benefits, recovery as well as training in a slightly different way. So I like to do more of that closer towards the end of the training camp to kind of help recover a bit.
That's excellent. I really love that you pointed out the importance of keeping things kind of light as well. I think sometimes you can burn out easier if everything is so just grinding all the time. So I think it's cool that you mix in fun things. I also love that you focus on your recovery, because the recovery thing is a big one, especially for younger athletes. They sometimes don't think they need it, and they realize that, man, if you just take a little bit of time for recovery at the end, you'll have a much better result often. You'll feel better. You mentioned ice baths. So ice baths is something I really want to start doing these, and I've seen a lot of athletes doing them. How did you get started in ice baths? When did you start using them, and what major benefits do you usually feel after you do one?
Okay, so for ice baths, my brother started studying Wim Hof. He read his book and he started practicing. I would watch him go sit outside in the snow and like meditate and breathe and put snow on his legs and watch it melt. And he would teach me about it. And so he's like, come try it, see what you think. And it takes you a couple baths to kind of get used to how shockingly cold the water is, because we could get it really cold. And we would do this in the winter too. So it's like, man, once you do an ice bath in the winter doesn't bother you anymore. You're like, outside's not even cold. Like, I could walk around with a tank top out here. It's fine. So I started trying the ice baths with my brother and trying the breathing techniques with it. And it was interesting to see the amount of mental stress I was able to start to control. And that came with like being able to hold my breath, was able to like, while I was in cold water, it helped me develop an ability to tolerate mental stress. And I can keep better composure under stress, and I can keep a good amount of awareness and focus. And those are like, that mental aspect is huge for jiu-jitsu, or just for any sport really, or even just for life. And I think, so not only does it help strengthen me mentally, but also there's a whole bunch of physical rehabilitation aspects to it. The cold water, for one. There's a lot of science that I've read in for this. I've studied in my class. I don't think I can go into all of it, but there's a ton of science about how the oxygen turnover rate goes in your cells with the breathing patterns that we would do. It basically ends up being like hyperoxygenating your cells is what the breathing pattern with the cold constricted blood vessels does. I got to the point where I was so aware of my body that as soon as I got out of the ice bath, if I did not stay in long enough, I would feel exactly where inflammation would rush to in my body, whether it was my lower back, my right knee, or my elbow. And it starts to feel so good to be in there. You start to crave that. Very easily can you start to crave that. And a couple times I would stand up out of the bath and I feel the inflammation rush to my back. And I was like, oh no, I need to get back in. Like, I need to go for round 2 because this needs to go away. It's not fixed yet. And you do start to, the longer you're in the water, you do start to feel like your body will kind of warm up and create a little heat pocket around you. And you can kind of like, it'll kind of take the edge off your skin. You should move the water around though. So that's not cheating because you let the water get warm. But yeah, it's really cool. There's a lot of benefits of it. The mental strength and control, as well as the rehabilitation process and killing inflammation, which is huge. Inflammation is one of the biggest causes of pain. So some of those things together they're great.
Yeah. I'm really, really looking forward to be able to starting doing it myself. With you, I forgot you're in Utah, so man, in the wintertime, like that's no struggle whatsoever. I'm having to figure out, I live in kind of a tropical environment, so I'm having to figure out ways to like constantly have reusable ice. Someone on Reddit mentioned that they take a 24 case of water bottles and they freeze them and then just drop those in as like reusable ice cubes. I thought that was pretty brilliant. Right?
This is brilliant. Yes, because we would dump bags of ice, but the little ice pebbles, they dissolve so fast. And then we discovered we could get the water much colder if we got like 6 to 8 of the big blocks of ice. Yeah. And then it got really cold. But now I'm going to try the water bottle thing because then I don't have to buy a freezer or anything. Yeah. That's a great idea.
Because I was trying to think I'm going to have to buy ice like every other day, and it's going to be just a pain in the butt to get to the store back and forth all the time. And then this guy said, I just use reusable cubes by freezing water bottles. I was like, dude, that was genius. So I'm also trying to buy this inflatable. There's an inflatable pod. You've probably seen these, but it's like an inflatable pod that can fold up into a small carrying bag, and it becomes an ice bath. It becomes like a little ice pod that you just sit in. So these are all the things I'm trying to do. I'm really stoked. I'm glad that it's something that you do, and I'm glad to hear that you feel it works, because I've heard nothing but good things so far. I think when I first saw it, I was like, I don't know if that's like pseudoscience or whatever, but the more I've read, the more I realize now there's real science to it, and the mental aspects.
Oh yeah, there's tons.
Yeah.
I happen to be going through physiology class, an exercise physiology class, and my professor happened to actually be studying the effects of like sauna and ice bath at the same time as he was giving the class, and I had just started doing the ice bath, so we really got to dive deep on how the sauna is affecting your body and the ice bath affecting your body. Like we really got to dive in a specific way into those, and I was like, wow, this is gold. It was really cool.
That's so cool. Yeah, I'll definitely give you a report on how it goes once I order this thing and get it over here. But hopefully,
sounds good. Yeah. Make sure you go up to your neck.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So so you go up to your neck, and then how long do you usually stay in? To like when you're done training, let's say, what's the amount of time you stay?
So when I'm done training, and I think it's actually technically better to do it when you first wake up in the morning, which is rough. Okay, yeah. It's rough. But after training, so if I'm just starting to do ice baths, I would say 3 breathing cycles is what me and my brother do. Most people, I feel like they would do just 3 minutes, which is about 1 breathing cycle. A breathing cycle is like 30 breaths. But this is just how my brother and I do it. We would stand for 3 breathing cycles. You do 30 breaths, you hold your breath as long as you can, you repeat that. We would do 3 times, and that usually takes about 6-ish minutes, maybe give or take a minute. And that would be 1 round. Now, sometimes my brother and I have stayed in for like anywhere between 8 and 16 minutes. I don't know if I think some people technically say, oh, you shouldn't stay in for longer than 10 minutes. That's bad. But I think your body starts to warm itself because you start to be able to kind of regulate, or, when you make that little heat pocket in the water. So I don't know. That's how long that I've stayed in before. And I still felt fine. Like I felt like I could keep going, no problem.
Yeah, that's the one thing I always hear from people is they say that like, yeah, they'll do a hard training, they do the ice bath, and they get out and they feel like they could go train again. So that's definitely, I'm pushing 40 now, so that's definitely what I need, something to make me feel like I can go back and not feel like I got hit by a car the next day. So so yeah, hopefully it helps. Amy, you know, your rise in the sport has been really cool to see. I remember I first saw you. I believe it was when you won Pans as a brown belt. You won Pans, and then you won Worlds. You won Worlds, Pans, and an American Nationals as a brown belt. And I was just like, man, where did this girl come from? She's awesome. And so by the time that you got to ADCC, I was like, oh, dude, that's awesome that she's going to be in ADCC. I know that was a major event and accomplishment in your life and career. Would you mind giving us a recap of what it was like being at the 2022 ADCC and what your biggest takeaways were?
Okay, what was ADCC like, and what were my biggest takeaways? So in some ways, ADCC is the same as every other tournament, but maybe that's just me being the same when I go into any tournament. Because ADCC, of course, it was different. It was set up like a big show, almost akin to the kind of hype you would put behind an MMA fight. And that's a different feel to it. But I've had an MMA fight, so I wasn't as shocked by that, which I imagine some of the other competitors might have been, but I don't know. They're all pretty big competitors too. So ADCC, I had a lot of preparation going into it because, you know, they brought us to, you know, this big fancy hotel, which is where we stay at, this big fancy hotel, and all the competitors are also there. So, you know, you're going to walk around and run into each other, and that's just a weird thing to know. There's all this scheduling stuff we had to attend to that was like, oh, here's a rules meeting. We would meet in this room. Here's where there's catered food. You meet in this room. And there's all these like logistics that were just interesting. It's really like this big sponsored event. It is just really interesting to just go to all these different places. And then to prepare for, you know, you're there for a couple of days. I really felt like I almost went out of the country. I felt like I went to Japan, like Rickson Gracie and his UFC fights, and I felt like I spent time in the country with the people, and then like went and had this experience. That's kind of what I felt. I felt like I was in a different place, and I guess I kind of was. And then you prepare for this tournament, and you know, warming up and fighting was just like every other tournament. You know, that's one of the truths I take away from every tournament is knowing that as soon as I step on the mat, shake hands, it's all the same. Whether I was fighting somewhere locally or whether I was fighting in ADCC, the aspect of fighting is the same. It's just me, my opponent, and the mats. And so there's always a security or comfort in that, because it's like, oh, at the end of the day, I'm just going to be doing jiu-jitsu. Okay, yeah, there's a crowd there. There's a person there. There's flames shooting up over there. Like, wow. There's, you know, there's all these different things to make it theatrical, and that's cool. But honestly, I get so focused into competing that stuff all becomes a side thought, and it's really fun to watch later because I'm like, wow, look at all this stuff. But like, I'm, you know, all that's just like blocked out. It was really cool though. I'll tell you what. You know, we walk out to this big stage just like an MMA fight. You know, you have this walkout and you go everywhere. And we have that same thing with ADCC. We've got this face-off the night before. We've got this big, long walkout from the back, going up all these stairs on the stage, going around the sides. And you just get out on the stage and it just opens up. There's lights hitting you, big lights hitting you. There's a huge screen behind you. And there's just people. And there's so many people that you can't even see. It's just this ginormous black blur of people. And it's just like, wow, they're everywhere. They could be on the ceiling and I wouldn't even realize the difference. There's so many people. Felt kind of like if you could make a gladiator stadium that was like all dark, that's kind of what it was like. It was like this huge like arena, which is what it was. But it was cool. But fighting was the same. I'll tell you one thing that was not the same though, as like your general competition or even like a large scale competition. Hearing so many people scream at the same time is its own experience. that was different. Like when I don't usually hear the crowd, I might notice every now and then, but when I was fighting with Gabby and I ended up taking her down, everybody freaked out, and I could almost, like, I was freaking out because I was like, oh no, get on top, get on top. But then I could almost feel the screams from everybody else almost pick me up and shove me out of and it's crazy. And there's just this ringing, this noise of all these people. And inside of all of it is me trying to, like, I need to do this. Okay, what now? I need to do this. Okay, what now? Like, it was such an interesting feeling to have everybody. And then, when I stand up too, I put a little personality or oomph into when I stood up and walked back in the center. I put my arm up. I was like, yeah, I think I got it. And that riled people. And I was never used to me being the one who, like, leads the crowd with their cheers and stuff. But everyone's like, yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're responding. Wow, it was just an experience. And hearing them boo too. That's like, I can't imagine being booed by so many people and just be like, well, this is awkward. Like, yeah, because they were messing with the points and they would cheer and then they'd take the points off to reset them and everyone would boo and then they'd cheer again and they'd boo and they cheered finally for the final score. And it was, I didn't know if I was going to win or lose that fight, but I was like, as soon as they started messing with the points and they took it off, I was like, oh no, the ref was going to send us to overtime. And I was like, ref, did I not get any points for that? Please tell me I did. And he's like, wait, let me go talk to the table. He goes and talks to the table and they start messing with the points. And then I knew at that moment, I was like, if they're messing with points, that means I get points and she doesn't have points. I'm going to win. Yeah. So at that point I was like, I'm going to win, but don't get your hopes up because they could change it in 5 seconds, but I think I'm going to win. Yeah, it was fun.
Oh,
it
was
cool.
Incredible. What an incredible experience. I appreciate you sharing that so vividly as well. God, it was such an exciting event. The moment you took Gabby down, I was jumping. I was like, oh my God. And then like you said, I was concerned because you guys went out of bounds. I was concerned about whether or not they were going to award the points. And then when they did, oh man, what an incredible moment! And I love what you said there too. You said that and this is something that John Danaher made a really interesting post on Instagram. He kind of makes these. I'm sure you follow him too. He makes these long, like thought out posts that are very intriguing. And one of the things he was talking about was the illusion of spectacle, right? So like you go to a big event, there's the crowd, there's music, there's people cheering. In an event like ADCC, I mean, you might be one of the very few jiu-jitsu athletes in the world that's ever had pyro as part of the presentation. You mentioned the fire and stuff. There's all these illusions and distractions that are out there. But at the end of the day, when you get on the mats and you slap hands, like you said, it's just jiu-jitsu. You're doing jiu-jitsu. And so I think it's interesting to hear that you're able to, despite the powerful illusion that ADCC 2022 created, you were still able to keep yourself not distracted by that, and that shows a lot of mental fortitude, because I think a lot of people would be distracted by that, regardless of how many times you've competed. What advice would you give to someone that's maybe going to step on a big stage for the first time? Maybe they're going to do their first Worlds, or maybe they make it to ADCC Championships someday. What advice would you give to stay centered?
I think I would do this. I think some people get intimidated by the hype or the level of the tournament itself, just the name of the level of tournament. And I think once you go to a really big tournament and you have such a bigger crowd, that can be intimidating, or less intimidating. It can just be overwhelming because there's so much going on. And then you have to think about fighting. It can be really overwhelming. So here's what I wish I did before I did my first IBJJF. I wish I went and saw what it looked like first, so I could understand what level of stimulus I was going to walk into, and I could prepare for that mentally. Because, we all know that most of the fight is mental, or at least if you don't have a strong mental component to it, I mean, it doesn't matter how strong you are physically if mentally you break easily. So I would say I would go to a big IBJJF tournament, or a big tournament that's in a big arena. I would go to one and kind of see what it's like, and that way you can kind of estimate that in your vibe, your nerves, your jitters, whatever you have, whatever you're going to anticipate. You can anticipate that.
That's outstanding advice. Yeah, I think like you said, being able to expose yourself to what to expect. That's really, really smart advice. I appreciate, Amy, I appreciate your recap of ADCC. That was awesome, and I appreciate that advice you gave to people out there listening who aspire to someday be participating at the events that you find yourself in. So much appreciated.
You had asked me what my takeaway from ADCC was,
yes,
and I had some pretty astounding takeaways, and they were really powerful and passionate, especially in the moment, because I think ADCC was one of the times where it was confirmed. I had this was my second experience with this. My trials, the second trials, the ADCC trials I did, I evolved as a fighter in the middle of the tournament. Like I showed up as one person and changed. Wow. And became a different person while I was fighting. My fighter identity changed. And what happened in the trials and happened again was confirmed a second time in ADCC and proved that this mentality for me is victorious. I was able to get to a place in my mind where I remembered the truth. That's what I would phrase it as, where I remembered the truth. And what that means to me is I remembered the truth about every tournament that I would go to or would ever go to. And the truth is that you're there to learn, you're there to perform and be your best. And the line of thinking that I was thinking before I walked out to my fights was, and this was especially for ADCC, as I walked out to fight Gabby Garcia, I did start to get a little nervous or jittery. And I was like, you know what, Amy? What's the truth about this tournament? Well, the truth is, win or lose, you're going to learn something great here. And that's what you came for. What's more truth to expound on that? You are exactly where you want to be. This is exactly what you want to be doing. This is exactly the level of intensity of a fight and challenge that you want to face. Just remind yourself that this is exactly where you want to be. This is why you're here. This is what you came to do. The nerves you feel and because some people, they get anxious and they want to run away from the things that make them anxious. That's totally normal. But in all reality, the truthfulness of it is you want to be there, and this is exactly what you came here to do. So this is not something to be nervous of and want to flee from. It's like, I'm going to go into this full force. This is the best of me you're going to find. And it was so cool. I did that twice. I changed as a fighter in the trials, and I came out to somebody I'd lost to before a couple times, and I had just had this feeling about me where I was like, I do not care what you are going to do. I am going to give you hell. That is what is going to happen here. And if I win, so be it. And the same thing happened. I used the same thing for Gabby Garcia. I was like, you know what? Let's freaking go. If you beat me, I don't care. I'm going to give you hell. And you saw it in my face. I totally felt it. It's so cool. I walk out there, my all the nerves, they vanished. How I felt completely changed. I was now incredibly excited to see what I could do. And I was, more than that, I was absolutely willing to do what I needed to do. Anything I needed to do, I was willing to do it. If I needed to work harder, I needed to sweat harder, I needed to breathe hard, I was like, I will do whatever I need to. And I'm going to love every single second of it. And you see me walk out to fight her, and I see everyone, and I welcomed everyone. I walked down the ramp, I took off my jacket, and I was like, let's freaking go. This is why I'm here. And both times, I was absolutely liberated to be the best of myself. And that, I think, was the best thing that absolutely could have happened to me in both the trials and ADCC.
Amy, I don't know if the camera can see. I got goosebumps. This is awesome. Oh man, next time I go compete, I'm gonna come back and listen to this segment, man. You just fired me up. That's awesome, man. What a cool experience. I appreciate you sharing that. A lot of people have moments like that, but they just kind of forget them in the smoke and when the smoke clears after a big event. They kind of forget the little things in the moment like that. You're an awesome storyteller. I appreciate you sharing that with us. It's so cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amy, we've reached about the halfway point of the show. This is where I always play a game with my guests. This is a game called the Pummel. Oh. The Pummel is a series of random questions. Some of these are about Jiu Jitsu. Some of them have nothing to do with Jiu Jitsu. But if you're down to play the Pummel, I'd love to play this game with you.
All right. Fire away.
All right, let's do it. Question number 1, what's the worst job you've ever had?
Worst job? I have a pretty good attitude, so it's like hard to say that what my worst is. Which one do I think was the least enjoyable? I don't know. I think sometimes babysitting is the least enjoyable thing, because if you don't have a good attitude about it, you're like, this just sucks to be here, and I wish you just go to sleep and stop being demanding. Maybe. Like, I don't know.
Amy, don't
leave me alone.
Don't include any of that in your post if you're advertising babysitting services. That's all just internal model. Now that she's made it in jiu-jitsu, she's safe to say that out loud. But beforehand, that would be the worst interviewing thing that you can say. But I have 2 toddlers. I feel that some nights I'm just like, oh my God, please just get tired. Please drink your milk. Please go to sleep. I feel it.
That was just, it's really, you just have a bad attitude about being there. Like, it's like, oh, you're not trying to like play and have fun. You just have a bad sulky attitude about doing anything, and you're probably a bum. That's the first thing I thought of.
You know what's funny about that though is like I've thought, like, as I was dealing with like my kids being difficult. I mean, my kids are awesome most of the time, but all toddlers and kids have their moments. Like, you know, my kid will throw something at me, or they'll throw up on the floor or whatever. And I'm just thinking, if these weren't my kids, could you imagine what babysitters must feel like? This is not your child, and you're having to deal with all of this. I can only imagine the headaches that you go home with. So, newfound respect for the babysitters out there for sure. I'm glad you made it through that. Amy, what do you think is your most hated food? What's something that you cannot eat no matter what?
I cannot eat no matter what. I think it just depends. I'm not a picky eater, not at all. Like, and I'm just about willing to try everything. Now, if you start describing some weird stuff while I'm trying something new, we're gonna have a problem. Okay, I'm pretty open to trying stuff, but just don't be making comparisons to other things when I'm trying stuff, and we're good. I don't know. My bad experiences with food have been because it was bad food, not because it had a bad taste or a bad texture.
Yeah.
I don't know. I had bad octopus one time, and it absolutely was dreadful.
Oh, no. Did you get food poisoning?
That ruined octopus for me.
Did you get food poisoning?
No, just my, this might be TMI, but my coach happened to be describing a texture, the texture. This is gonna sound so bad. He happened to be describing the testes and scrotum to me in detail and comparing them to my octopus.
That is not the texture you want to hear when you're eating anything.
And it was bad. It was bad octopus too. Like it was mushy and like, and I turned over. He's laughing his butt off, and I turned over to him and spit it up. It might have been TMI, but I'm glad you get a good laugh out of it.
You should have spit it directly at him for that. If someone did that to
No, I did. Yeah. I turned and just.
Yeah, I feel you on that. Like, anytime someone puts a mental picture, if there's especially with texture of something you're eating, that's always like a party foul for sure. Yeah, that's a particularly bad one your instructor pulled on you there. So I can understand why octopus just isn't the same anymore. I totally get it. What do you think is your favorite bad food to eat? Like, what's your favorite junk food?
Oh, my favorite junk food. Actually, I would probably take anything fruity over like any sweets almost every time.
Cool.
I actually I really love fruit, and I think I ate pretty well growing up. So that's just like, to me, that's like the natural sugars. They just feel so much better in my stomach. But I love cobbler and ice cream, or brownies and ice cream. I really love that. And for like snacks and stuff, I love pastries and sweetbreads. Like little things like muffins. I love these little breads. I really like that.
That's awesome. Can you cook? Do you make like your own breads or your own stuff at home?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
I haven't, because like I'll make them with my family, but just by myself, I won't, just because, one, it's effort to cook as much as I like it. But if you're just cooking for one person, it's like, why am I going to make 50 muffins? Like, what in the world am I going to do with all these muffins? Yeah. So I'll cook with my family, and I eat really clean when I'm just at my house. So I just don't do it at my house.
Yeah, no, I asked because I like a lot of the same kind of foods you mentioned, like when I'm having like a cheat meal or whatever. And oftentimes I'm looking at it like, man, I could probably make this, but the problem with me is I'm literally handicapped in the kitchen. Like I can't do any. I burn toast. I mess up everything. So when I hear people describe like the things they like, I'm always curious if they can actually make it themselves, because that's something that I do not possess that power. I wish I did.
Yeah, that my brother and I, we're both health nuts, and what we would do is we both were like, we need to stop eating processed oils. We need to stop eating foods that cause inflammation. We need to do all this. So we would take our favorite foods that we used to eat when we'd go out, and we were like, we need to find a way to make the best, healthiest version of this at home. So one of his things we made at home was like, he would get Beto's, like, what's they called there, or all the fries, not nacho fries. No. Carne asada fries. Carne asada fries. Yeah. So then we found a way to make like these carne asada fries with like all organic potatoes and guacamole, and that became a really fun event to like make healthy food. That was like our favorite dish. We've done that before.
That's awesome. There's actually an Instagram profile I follow. I'll send it to you when we're done here. But they take everyday foods that are out there, like fast food and junk food and stuff, and they show you how to make the healthy version of it, like step by step. And it's like these little 1-minute videos, and they just show you instead of this, use this, instead of this, use this. And then at the end, it looks exactly like the same thing, but it's like the healthier version. So yeah.
What is this? You need to send this to me.
I'll send it to you on Instagram as soon as we're done here. Yeah, for sure. It's a really cool channel. Yeah, I still mess all of it up, but you'll probably do better than me. So I think anyone would do better than me. What do you think is your what's something you wish you were better at? Something outside of martial arts that you wish you could do better?
Like as a skill or like an attribute, like a trait, characteristic trait.
Let's say either one.
What do I wish I could be better at? I wish I had a better ability to articulate my thoughts.
Really?
Like I wish I had an expanded verbal arsenal so that I could communicate incredibly well and maybe even help other people communicate with me, because I do have words. Like if that could be my superpower would be to understand exactly what you mean by what you say and to be able to convey in your words exactly what I mean.
Amy, you seem to be like an advanced communicator to me. I mean, when someone says like, I wish I had a better arsenal of communication to express, those are all like, even the way you said that, you communicate really well. Like that surprises me that you feel that you named that one. Do you feel like you could do better, huh?
I definitely think so.
Really?
Definitely think so.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Interesting. What about a skill? What's a skill that you wish you could do better?
A skill, I would just love. Okay. I love aspects of fighting. If I could be a freaking ninja, I'd be a freaking ninja. Like I love aspects of fighting. Okay, then outside of that, I would just love to dance. I love dancing so much. I would love to do. I've been really looking into a lot of. It's a certain kind of country swing. It's like West Coast or East Coast. I don't know. It's a certain kind of country swing, but it looks super fun. I really like how you can be, you can express a lot of your personality in it and with a partner, and you can just make it so fun. I really would love to be a really great dancer, and even like freestyle dance, any dancing. I would love to be an incredible popping, locking, freaking spinning on the floor, doing tricks and stuff. I love that.
That's amazing. Yeah, you definitely add some new victory dances after you win championships. You could have some kind of like routine set for your celebration.
Oh yeah,
that'd be dope. Yeah,
dude, I would totally do that. After every competition, I would have a new dance move or something, and that would, of course, that would be like media candy right there.
Right.
Like, this would just be a great idea. This is money right here. I need to do this. This is money.
Yeah, sure. There'll be always like the clip breakdowns of how you won, and then the clip breakdown of the dance you did. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. That's funny.
What do you think is something you spend way too much money on?
I actually have a hard time buying stuff, especially stuff for myself. What I spend way too much money on, I'll spend way too much money on food, but I had this conversation with myself that good food is worth a lot of money. Yeah. So I'll spend good money on food. And I think on gifts for other people. Like, I feel weird about buying stuff for myself only if I really need it. Every now and then, I'm getting better. I'm getting better at being able to be like, oh, I like that. I'm going to buy it. I'm getting better at that. But I like to spoil my friends and family with the things they like. Um, yeah, I suck at buying things.
That's cool. No, that's great. That's actually a really good answer. I like that a lot. I also like what you said about the food. It was, I think Henner Gracie had a quote where he said, with health, you either pay for it now or you pay for it later. And I think buying more expensive organic foods and buying the better quality ingredients and stuff is a much better investment than having to, pay for medical bills later. So that's awesome. I like that a lot.
Yeah, you've got your most expensive tool, your greatest gift, your greatest ability. Like, you've got this. Like, why, if this is your ability to do all things, then yeah, like, that deserves my highest amount of attention.
Absolutely. Yeah. Best fuel for the machine, for sure. What do you think is, do you have a favorite superhero?
A superhero? No, not really. I mean, I could pick one, but I've never really had superheroes or role models before.
Nice. Okay. How about if you could choose if you could choose a superpower, what would you choose?
Well, the super communication is what I choose. I suppose, flying and invisibility. I think I would if I had to choose a different superpower than super communication, I think I would choose to be invincible of sorts, because I think it would be really neat if I could safely and like efficiently travel around all of the European and Asian continents, like all those mountains, like in Mongolia and stuff. Just travel all of them and see what's up there. But like, nothing can hurt me. I don't get cold. I don't die. Like, I just feel invincible and I feel warm all the time, and I can just freaking run up hills like a vampire or something with super speed, because I would just love to explore all these places and, be invincible so I could explore the world.
I love that. It's a great answer. Good one. Good choice. And final question for the Pummel game, Amy. If a zombie apocalypse breaks out right now, what's the first thing you do?
Pray.
Good answer.
I think I stand by that answer, because I need some extra guidance about what to do first right now, and maybe you could lead me. Yeah, I don't know if you wanted a funny answer or a serious answer, and I guess that it was funny, and then it turned serious, and I was like, oh yeah, actually, yeah, I would do about that. If I had to do something that would be like funnier, I don't know. 'Cause what starts to matter when a zombie apocalypse happens? Okay, you take care of your basic needs and the people around you. I guess I'd go find my cult and I would join ranks, and then we would have not battles. What's it called? We'd have missions where we'd go out and raid and shoot zombies. Like we would join our band and start our missions. That's what we would do.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that you would take action after praying. You'd take action. That's excellent. That's what in a zombie apocalypse, the world needs people to take action. So that's good. Good answer. And Amy, that was the final question for the Pummel game. Congratulations, you win. You got your double underhooks.
Thank you.
Of course. So Amy, I wanted to switch gears with you really quick. I wanted to dive into some technical discussion with you. Sure. One thing that's very clear in watching you compete is that you have a really good ability to wrestle as well. And so you have great takedowns on the feet. You fight well on the feet. Is that something you spend a lot of time on? Do you dedicate time in a wrestling room, or is that just something you do in your day-to-day jiu-jitsu training?
No, yeah, that's day-to-day in my jiu-jitsu training. I have a couple of my training partners who they have wrestled before, and so they're able to give me a lot of tips and stuff. And a lot of my base and stuff actually comes from when I was training MMA. So like, actually my stance isn't like a typical wrestling stance. My stance is still like an MMA fighter stance. I think it was definitely highlighted because wrestling in no-gi is a really big aspect of no-gi. Unless everybody pulls guard, which is typically the case. But yeah, I do like to wrestle. I do think it's fun, and it's mostly in jiu-jitsu. Like, I've never went to a wrestling class or anything. Just maybe some of the guys at the gym have taught stuff, and my coaches taught. But yeah, and I think we put a little bit more emphasis on it for ADCC too, because we knew what kind of tournament it was and just how beneficial like good wrestling would be. And as well as that's a part of the strategy for fighting somebody bigger than you is to not be on bottom. So what do? Well, you wrestle. You don't go on bottom. If you think they're going to monopolize that spot, well, don't get there. And so wrestling was one of the ways you don't get in a bad spot. And, in the case of Gabby Garcia, stay on your feet and don't go down, because, if you get underneath somebody that big, you're going to suffer. So that's not an option. Don't do it.
That's awesome. What kind of adaptations do you usually have to make with your wrestling when you put the gi on? Is it usually fairly similar, or are there some slight adaptations that you usually make when there's material to grab? Yeah.
When you have the material, you can change your stance a little bit, because you can hang on to them a lot easier to prevent them from shooting on you. But there's also, the dynamic changes so much, because now you got all these grips that they can make out of nowhere seemingly, where they can, they can pull you down to the mat really easy. They can pick you up and throw you with judo throws, or they can sit really low and they can pull guard. So there's a lot of ranges of places that you can get taken down. So it's almost more dangerous, I think, in the gi. But you can almost, in ways, slow it down too, so that you can be more comfortable. So it's kind of got this funny give and take, where it's like, oh, they can pull guard at any moment, they could judo toss me at any moment, but also because I can hang on to them, I can kind of stunt their ability to get in, and make that slower. And in wrestling, like without the gi, because you have so much less contact, you're forced to cut the space so much better and so much faster. So if you do get a takedown in no gi, it's like very fast and very hard, and it's got to be that way. But with the gi, it can be you can take somebody down much slower or fast if you want. You can do everything in gi.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's really awesome that this is all your wrestling ability is just from day-to-day jiu-jitsu training, and of course a little bit of your MMA background. Because watching you would a lot of people would assume, oh, this girl, she wrestled at one point. She must have wrestled in school or something, because your wrestling, it's very sharp. I mean, it's really, really sharp. So that's super cool that's developed just within jiu-jitsu. Yeah. I think a lot of people out there who want to improve their takedowns, they often feel like, man, they have to, either join a judo club or go to a wrestling room. But, you can just put the time in an everyday jiu-jitsu room and develop just like Amy has. That's super cool to hear. Speaking of your game, Amy, one aspect of your game that I really like is your guard passing style. I love using the knee slice in my own game, and your knee slice is world class. So I'd love to pick your brain on that, if you don't mind. At what point in your development do you think that the knee slice became like a staple of your game?
It just became a staple. At what point in the game, is what you asked. It became a staple because it just works. Like, I actually like a lot of other passes just as much, and some of them maybe more, but it just seems to work. So I just do it because it works. And then when somebody defends it, okay, now I guess I can try a different one because it's not working now. I think when I was a blue belt, I learned how to do a really solid knee slice class that seemed to be very effective. And I think knee slice itself is very simple and it's very effective. I think what's actually difficult about knee slice is the entrance. If you can make a clean entrance, you'll probably get the knee slice. If you can't get in, very difficult.
Yeah, very well said. Speaking of which, there's a subtle detail that I've seen you use a lot that I think is really smart. You step on the ankle or shin of your opponent when you're standing before you start knee slicing. We saw you do this at ADCC against Liz Clay, for example. It's a great way to immobilize someone before you start your passing. So how important is immobilizing someone's hips before you even start passing in the first place to get that entry that you're referring to?
As far as getting the entry, I don't know if I say you have to immobilize their hips to come in with an entry. I think once you enter, you need to find a quick way to immobilize their hips. Because, you have to, just makes sense. You need to be close enough to control the hips, control their hips. So if you don't even enter, you're not going to. So I think you have to make the entry. And that's just the hardest thing about the knee slice, is getting into it. And I think that actually parallels with a lot of other moves in jiu-jitsu. If you can get halfway into this move before they recover, just right away, you've probably got a pretty good shot of getting it, because jiu-jitsu works. Whether it's me against a black belt, whether it's an athletic blue belt against a brown belt, jiu-jitsu works at the end of the day. So just because you're a different belt doesn't mean it's not going to work on you. You maybe have more technique that combats it, but jiu-jitsu works. I'll never not believe that somebody, if I make a mistake, a blue belt can sweep me. I shouldn't, because I should know better, but that's just the reality of jiu-jitsu is effective.
Yeah.
And I keep that in mind for my fights too. Like, okay, jiu-jitsu works for you and jiu-jitsu works for me. So really it's about who's willing to work harder and who does it first. And that'll decide who is able and who was smarter, who was able to get in to a win first. I do in my instructional, I do go over my 2 entrances, which I didn't develop in training. I developed them in the middle of my fights. Wow. I developed them at ADCC trials and and at ADCC. I developed both of these entrances. One at Worlds and one at ADCC trials. I developed 2 different entrances for 2 different responses from my opponent. And they work, and they still work. And I go over them in a lot of detail in the BJJ Fanatics that I did, the one on knee slice passing. Yeah, I go into some detail on that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think everyone always loves seeing the techniques shown that you developed in the battlefield. I think that obviously, there's tons of technique instructions out there, but it's always great when someone shows specifically the things that worked at the pinnacle of the sport. So it's really cool that you added those details. I like that a lot. What do you think are some of the most overlooked details of the knee slice pass? What are some things that you see students developing the knee slice maybe not realize until later on in their development, or overlook completely?
So what details are they not doing, or are they overlooking because of their importance? One, I talked about range already. There is a certain range of how far away from them you slide versus how close your hips are to them when you do your knee slice. And you can so right as you knee slice, you can knee slice decently far away from them. Okay, if you can make that work and get close enough back to them, you're okay. I think that's one of the details that's overlooked, is right after you knee slice, you need to push your hips close to their hips. If you're doing the knee slice kind that I'm thinking about. And I think there's it's down to inches and less than inches of space here, but it still makes a difference on whether or not you can control the position well. And I'll teach people this. And I'll go and I'll stick my whole arm under their hip because there's that much space there. Sometimes I'll even stick my foot or my leg in there because I can show them hey, you feel this space right here? You can use your hips to guide my hips way better right here. Look, close all this space. Look, and you already know where I am because you can feel me. You don't have to see me. You already know I'm that close. So it's a huge aspect of control, but also awareness of yourself and where your opponent's at, and that awareness of where they're at. The sensation of touching them can give information to your spine faster than to your brain, and you can respond quicker than having it process at your brain. The difference in nerves. So range would be one of the things I think is an overlooked detail. Another one is, I think, head position. Head position and how much pressure you can put with your head, I think, is overlooked. Because you can, in a variety of positions, there's a significant amount of drive, pressure, and grinding you can do with your head. And sometimes that makes the difference between whether or not you're going to get the pass.
Excellent detail.
I think those are the 2 things I'll leave. I'll leave it at that. There's more, but I'll leave those.
I love that. The head positioning thing is one, Amy, that I've personally struggled with a little bit. I think that sometimes when I'm looking for my knee slice, I'm so focused on the details of the entry of the knee and then obtaining the underhook on the far side that sometimes and then of course controlling the near arm, controlling their near arm so that they can't frame against me. I think I forget that myself. Just to use my head more often, especially if I'm doing the lower variation. So I love that you pointed that out, because I think that I could see that being a common detail that's overlooked sometimes. So, guys, as Amy said, she has an instructional with us. She's got a couple of them. The one we're talking about today is the knee slice instructional. It's called Dynamic Knee Slice Passing in No-Gi. It's an outstanding instructional, and like Amy said, these are all techniques that she has battle tested and really developed in her game from competition at the highest levels of the sport. So if you guys are looking for really no-nonsense, battle-proven techniques to use for your guard passing, this is a great instructional to start with. So head over to bjjfanatics.com and pick it up. Amy, in closing, what are some of your major goals for 2023? What are some things that you hope to accomplish by the end of the year?
By the end of this year, well, I would like to get some fights lined up with Who's Number One and One Championship and Subversive, because I think all of those would be fun and have slightly different rule sets. And I want to just experience different rule sets, and I want to play with that, because I think I grew up, or at least my first couple of years training, the way we kind of counted points and the way we kind of fought was like the way you would fight for ADCC. And I actually had to learn how to fight well for IBJJF. And that took a little bit. Sometimes I'd be really close with my fights, and I wouldn't realize that there is a certain rule here, a detail here that would give them a point or whatever. And I there's some fights I lost, not because I really lost the match, but because I lost it to a rule set. And so I think I'm curious to expand my ability to strategically think and create for different rule sets. And I like some of the freedom the other rule sets provide to fight more authentically, to just fight and see who's better. I like that. I think that's invigorating. I think fighting with so much structure that you can hide behind, I think can be a turnoff to fighting for me. But at the same time, it's a different challenge because I have to develop myself to perform in a certain way. And I like challenge. So it works out in teaching me other skills.
That's great. You're a fighter's fighter, Amy. That's awesome. I love that. I can't wait to see you get back out there and do more. You're always incredibly entertaining to watch. And I really do appreciate you taking time to be here today. Your story is so cool. I appreciate you giving all the insight that you gave. And you're welcome back on the show anytime you'd like to come back.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure. I enjoy when I can have deep conversations with people about my experiences in jiu-jitsu, and to know that I might be able to provide an experience, an insight, or even an inspiration, hopefully, to somebody that might help them. If I can be impactful, that's great. We're hitting the mark. I help myself. I'm impactful to others. We're doing a good thing here.
Well, folks, unfortunately, we're fresh out of time. Amy, as I said, I've had such a great time talking with you here today. I really appreciate everything. And you're welcome back on the show whenever you'd like to come back. For anyone out there that wants to keep up with Amy, it's really easy to do so. She's active on Instagram. Her Instagram handle is Amy Campo Fighter. She's also active on Facebook. She's got a Facebook athlete page, so make sure you guys are following that. Besides that, guys, if you want to learn from Amy, no matter where you are in the world, she's got 2 great instructionals with us. The newest one is the one that we discussed today in depth. It's called Dynamic Knee Slice Passing No-Gi. And again, these are all the skills that have won her championships, multiple championships. So it's battle-tested stuff that definitely works well. So check that out at bjjfanatics.com. Also, guys, if you're in Tennessee or Northern California, at the end of the year around October, she's going to have some seminars going on. So make sure you guys are following her on social media and keeping up with those dates. If you're in those areas, you'd be really missing out if you don't show up to those seminars. So make sure you get yourself registered. And Amy, I appreciate your time once more. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to share.
Excellent. And that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. I really appreciate you tuning in. Please stay tuned for the next episode of the BJJ Fanatics podcast.